We are joined by the former Civil Aviation Minister, someone who was a driving force behind the open civil aviation policy. Praful Patel, appreciate your joining us. Many believe, Mr. Patel, the Indigo crisis has highlighted the weaknesses that existed in the open skies policy that you launched all those years ago. What was meant to be a competitive environment with more private airlines only ended up creating market monopolies and duopolies that have squeezed consumers and in a way blackmailed the government. Do you agree with that?
Well, I don't think the kind of market share which Indigo enjoys today is any consequence of the actions of the government. You see, skies have been deregulated for many years, and that has also helped passengers because you have more connectivity, more services, and more competition. Competition leads to better fares and better services. However, you see what happened after the collapse of Jet Airways. There was no other major player except Air India, which was, at that time able to, help the passenger. And in the current context, Indigo's expansion plans, which are not new, they've been there for many years, they kept on expanding. Unfortunately, we don't have many other stronger players which are at the moment able to take, additional market share. Remember one more thing. In the whole world today, there is a big shortage of aircraft, and deliveries by Airbus and Boeing are, very, very slow. They are not coming in the required numbers. Air India has huge order. In fact, Air India's order has been immensely delayed. Even a surprising factor that seats are not available at the moment, and that has led to so many, delays for Air India aircraft also.
Mr. Patel,
if Air India would have grown a little faster.
Mr. Patel, if I may intervene, the fact is that this isn't about a shortage of aircraft. The fact is you have an airline that has this huge market share, unlike many other countries that have 5 to 6 airlines that compete with each other. You mentioned Jet Airways. The truth of is not just Jet Airways. Several Indian airlines, private airlines, never took off. We can go back to East-West, Damania Airlines in another era, but even post that. Why is it that India has created a situation that has led to market monopolies and duopolies that have become a recipe for chaos? Why?
No, I agree with you. In fact, the earlier era of East-West and all is very old. The closest example today would have been Jet Airways. If we would have had that airline, then we would have had probably 3 strong players. However, that being the case, it's not intentional. The government is certainly not to blame for that. However, I personally feel that, yes, having 2 airlines for such a large country and somebody enjoying more than 60% market share is not a healthy phenomena. It's, as I said, not by design, it's by default. Indigo has been very, planning expansion for the last so many years, and they've been, actually placing orders, keeping in mind that aircraft deliveries are a staggered process. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not that you go to off the shelf and buy a plane. So this is certainly,
Mr. Patel,
they have planned things well for themselves.
Mr. Patel, I must intervene. I repeat, this is not a problem of a shortage of aircraft. This is actually because Indigo did not submit themselves to the new flight duty time limitations rules that would allow pilots to have certain hours of rest. They would then need more pilots. They should have been ready for the new FDTL rules, and therefore the customer is paying the price because, as I said, Indigo failed to hire enough pilots, probably thought that they could get away with this.
No. Rajdeep, you misunderstood. I was not referring to the current issue. I was referring just to how the airlines are not there as many and as much as we would like them to be. I certainly agree that having a 65% monopoly of the market is not a healthy sign, number one. Number two, the current FDTL issue has not been handled well by the airline itself. Because if you knew that there is a rule which has been implemented, and also the Supreme Court order has also been very explicit that you have to implement it from 1st November, it should have been planned well by them. They can say that, okay, we have X number of pilots for so many aircraft, But you see, everything doesn't go by, a rule book. At the same time, there are delays because of ATC, airport delays, and sometimes technical issues, and so many other factors. So airlines have to plan with that cushion. And I tell you, if on 1st November, Indigo, if they had realized that there is a shortage of pilots or not commensurate number of pilots, they should have scaled down 5% operations and not added another 6% to their existing capacity for new routes. If they would have planned that with...
Sir, that's precisely the issue I want to raise. The fact is, the entire aviation sector has been driven by greed, by demand, and a lack of effective regulation. You have airlines expanding rapidly like Indigo without having possibly the ready infrastructure. A regulator who should have ensured the expansion comes with necessary infra has also failed. That's the reality. Greed.
Yes, the airline certainly has failed, as well as the regulator, because the regulator, when they sanction new flights or new schedule, as they call it, the winter schedule, they should have seen how many captains and co-pilots you have. The new FDTL rules have come in, and therefore, are you able to cater to that kind of a requirement? That should have been also checked by the regulator. So it is, of course, largely the airline's responsibility, but it's also the regulator who is supposed to see and ensure that everything is okay. Because at the end of the day, who is the suffering, side of the story? It's the passenger who's been, really stranded, and he has no recourse. You see, in such a situation.
Mr. Patel, you admit that we need 4 to 5 competitive airlines. You also say that is not easy, and I accept that across the world, airlines don't necessarily make large amounts of money. But I want to ask you, how do we actually then ensure that we create an ecosystem where 4 or 5 airlines operates? Does the Civil Aviation Ministry have any role in doing what you and others were not able to achieve all these years?
No, most certainly they need to say that yes, we need more airlines, which as and when they receive some serious application. You see, you just can't say that I've got an application. It could be just, any other player who wants to enter the market. That's not the right way to go about it. We have smaller airlines. We also need to understand that, when you mean serious players, you need people with deep pockets. Airline business is traditionally, worldwide, as well as in India. You have seen Jet Airways collapse. You've seen other airlines collapse. Kingfisher has collapsed, as well as the fact that you need people with deep pockets. So serious players, is people who have a good financial as well as technical track record of maybe running an airline. And the other part is that, yes, even the other airlines which are flying today, like Akasa and SpiceJet, they should also try to get their act together. Unfortunately, SpiceJet was enjoying almost a 15-20% market share at one time. It went on, sliding, and it has reached to a situation where it's at 2% market share. Now, right. For that, again,
Mr. Patel, yesterday I had Captain Gopinath of Air Deccan, who said that the board of directors and Indigo management are those accountable and the buck stops with them. Do you agree that the government now should be acting against specific individuals or a specific airline? They've already shown some indication of that. Or do you believe that would be government intervention in the marketplace? Do you believe that Indigo must pay a price beyond just cutting their flights by 10%, that the government needs to do more to ensure a tough message is sent to Indigo so that this never happens again?
No. I certainly agree that there has to be tough messaging, and there can be penal action. But you see, it has to be balanced. You see, a lot of people, I can also talk, randomly whatever I want. That doesn't solve the problem. The problem here is we have to be responsible. At the same time, we have to be, ensuring that no major disruption takes place. After all, traveling public is the one who is going to suffer the most in case we do something knee-jerk. So at the moment, I would say, for the next 2 to 3 months, the idea should be first to calibrate the entire number of aircraft, the captains, pilots, whatever is the shortfall. stabilize that, make sure that the inconvenience to the traveling public is minimized, and then at the same time, you take strong action. I'm not saying nobody should be spared. If anybody is guilty, if anybody has derelict from his duties and responsibilities, strict action should be taken. Nobody is trying to save anybody.
You're saying strict action should be taken. Let me ask you a direct question, Mr. Patel. You spoke of open skies policy that you sort of in a way initiated all those years ago. At that time, it was about privatization, about breaking the monopoly of Indian Airlines. May I ask you, was it privatization that you did, or did you create a system that led to cronyism, where specific airlines backed by specific politicians were the ones that were allowed to carry on, and as a result, the sector never expanded organically? How will you respond to my question that the aviation sector in India is not an example of good privatization, but actually at one level of cronyism, sir?
Not at all. I think, Rajdeep, there was no history of Indigo running an airline at all. But they came with a strong plan, and they had an international person who had run airlines. The same applied to Jet Airways when they started. There's no cronyism or capitalism. It was never regulated. It's not that only 4 airlines will be allowed or 5 will be allowed. As many can, even today, I don't think there's any regulation that you can only allow X number of airlines. But as I said, it's a very tough business worldwide. Why are we only looking at India? Don't airlines fail in America, in Europe, in other parts of the world? They do. But at the same time, we have to understand that we need aviation, and we need to keep it a little deregulated, because government does not necessarily have to run airlines. However, having said that, the monitoring of the sector needs to be perfect. I'm sure some lessons are learned sometimes, through some events. This Indigo event itself is a reminder to us that we need to the airline has to be more responsible and accountable, as well as the oversight mechanism has to be strengthened. Yes, I agree that more airlines are required, and the government should try to ensure that quickly, at least 1 or 2 serious players enter the market, so that in the near future, may not be immediately possible, but at least over a year or 2, we will have more competition, and that will lead to better service and again better fares for the passengers.
Let me leave it there, Mr. Patel. I appreciate, though, you joining us, and we will perhaps need a proper report card of where privatization of our airlines has led us, the positives, and indeed, as we've seen in the last few days, potential negatives. Thanks very much for joining me.